The Korean mafia boss's daughter spoke for the first time. She called the black waitress, Mama Joon, had killed 17 men with his bare hands. He'd built Seoul's most feared crime empire from blood and brutality. But nothing, not the Yakuza, not the triads, not every enemy who'd ever tried to destroy him, terrified him like the silence of his 3-year-old daughter. 195 days without a single word. Until a freezing January night at the Golden Lotus, when a black waitress with desperate eyes served their table, and his daughter's first word in 3 years shattered his world. Ayama. Mama. And the most dangerous man in Korea realized he knew nothing about the truth. Jenny Hayes was drowning in Seoul, 26 years old, half Korean through a mother she'd never known, and so utterly alone it felt like suffocation. The Golden Lotus was her 4th job in 6 months. Her Korean was broken, her tips were insulting, and the other servers whispered about the black foreigner who didn't belong. But rent was due. Her visa was expiring, and the tiny room she called home in Itaewon cost more than her pride could afford. So she smiled through the exhaustion and pretended she couldn't hear the slurs disguised as concern. The Golden Lotus wasn't a restaurant. It was a hunting ground for the elite, where politicians made deals with gangsters over aged Hanwoo and 20-year whiskey, where money laundering happened between courses and everyone pretended not to notice. The chandeliers were crystal, the floors were imported marble, and the clientele could buy and sell lives without blinking. "Table 9!" Manager Park hissed, his face the color of ash. "The Black Dragon just arrived. Do not approach him directly. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not even look at him too long." Jenny's hands trembled as she adjusted her apron. "Who?" Park's laugh was bitter. "Joon. If you value your life, you'll pretend he doesn't exist." The kitchen went silent. The dishwasher's hands froze. The line cook's knife stopped mid-chop. Every person in that room knew the name. Joon was Seoul's nightmare in a tailored suit, head of the Black Dragon Syndicate that controlled everything from Gangnam real estate to government contracts. Widowed young, ruthless, known for eliminating enemies so thoroughly their families never found the bodies. "I'll take it," Jenny said, because she needed the money more than she needed safety. She pushed through the doors into the dining room. The usual hum of power had dropped to whispers. At table 9, positioned to see every entrance and exit, sat a man who looked like violence personified. Joon was 32 years old, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than Jenny made in a year. His hair was swept back, revealing a face of devastating beauty and cold brutality. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, white against his skin. Tattoos crept up his neck, disappearing beneath his collar like smoke. His eyes were black and empty, scanning the room with predatory focus. But it wasn't him that made Jenny's breath catch. Beside him, in a custom high chair, sat a little girl, maybe 3 years old. She had delicate features and dark hair in a neat bob. Her eyes were huge and vacant, staring at nothing, seeing everything. She clutched a small plush bunny against her chest, her tiny fingers white-knuckled around its ears. The child wore a pale blue dress that probably cost more than Jenny's monthly rent, but she looked like a ghost. This was Hana, Seoul's silent princess, the girl who hadn't spoken since the car bomb that killed her mother 2 years ago. Jenny approached the table, water pitcher shaking in her hands. "Good evening," she said in careful Korean, keeping her voice soft. "Still or sparkling water?" Joon didn't look up from the menu. "Sparkling. Warm milk for the child, not hot, warm." His voice was deep, commanding, the kind of voice that expected obedience and received it. As Jenny reached forward to pour water, her sleeve brushed the table. A scent lifted from her skin, cocoa butter lotion from the corner pharmacy, the cheap kind that smelled like home, mixed with the vanilla body spray she'd worn since college. Joon went completely still, his entire body locked like he'd been electrocuted. He looked up, and when his eyes met hers, Jenny felt the impact like a physical blow. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Recognition, pain, confusion. a buried memory clawing toward light. Then it was gone, replaced by glacial indifference. "Be quick," he said, his voice colder now, sharper. Jenny nodded, turning toward the child. She crouched slightly, bringing herself to the little girl's level, trying to inject warmth into her exhausted smile. "And for you, sweetheart, would you like some milk?" The child slowly lifted her head. When Hana's eyes met Jenny's, the world stopped. Jenny felt it like a fist to her sternum, a jolt of electricity that ripped through her chest and seized her lungs. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in 3 years. Not since the clinic in Itaewon. Not since the doctor with tired eyes had told her the baby hadn't survived the emergency delivery, that the infection had been too severe, that she was lucky to be alive. That phantom ache in her womb, the one she'd buried beneath language textbooks and visa applications, and the desperate attempt to outrun grief, roared back to life with savage intensity. The child's lips parted. Her small body began to tremble. She dropped the plush bunny, and it tumbled to the floor in slow motion. Then Hana did something she had never done in 1095 days of silence. She pointed. A tiny trembling finger aimed directly at Jenny's heart, and she screamed, "Yama!" "Mama." The word detonated through the golden lotus like a grenade. Every conversation died. Every fork froze midair. Every head turned toward Table 9, where the most dangerous man in Seoul stared at his daughter in absolute shock. Lee Joon's chair crashed backward as he surged to his feet, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun beneath his jacket, his eyes locked onto Jenny with lethal focus. And in that moment, she understood what it meant to be prey. "Who are you?" His voice was a whisper of death. "Who sent you?" Jenny couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because Hana was reaching for her now, small arms outstretched, tears streaming down her face as she screamed the word again and again. "Yama! Yama! Yama!" And somewhere deep in Jenny Hayes's fractured heart, a truth she didn't yet understand began to claw its way toward the light. Welcome to Daisy's Tales. You just stepped into something you can't unsee. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do safe here. We do dangerous. We do addictive. We do the kind of love that brands your soul and refuses to let go. And if you're new, buckle up, because what you're about to witness is a collision so violent, so inevitable, it'll rewrite everything you thought you knew about family, blood, and belonging. Hit that like button like your life depends on it. Subscribe because you're already hooked. And smash that notification bell because missing what comes next would be a crime. Now let's watch how one word from a child's mouth is about to tear Seoul's underworld apart. Jenny didn't remember being dragged through the kitchen, didn't remember the service elevator or the underground parking garage, or the moment Lee Joon's hand clamped around her wrist like a steel trap. What she remembered was the cold, the Seoul winter slicing through her uniform as he shoved her into the back of a black SUV that smelled like leather and gun oil and something darker she couldn't name. Hana was screaming, high-pitched, desperate wails that scraped against Jenny's skull like broken glass. The little girl thrashed in her car seat, face red and slick with tears, reaching toward Jenny with hands that trembled with need. "Please," Jenny heard herself say, though her voice sounded distant, underwater. "Let me hold her. She's terrified." Lee Joon's jaw worked in the rearview mirror, his eyes black holes of fury. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse out of pure spite. Then he jerked his head once, a brutal nod of permission. Jenny's fingers fumbled with the buckle. The moment Hana was free, the child launched herself into Jenny's arms, tiny fists clutching her uniform, face buried against her neck. The screaming stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was so absolute it felt like a living thing, pressing down on them, suffocating. Lee Joon's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Jenny watched him through the mirror, watched the muscle jump in his jaw, watched something like anguish flicker across his face before he buried it beneath stone. He was looking at them, at the way Hana fit perfectly against Jenny's chest, the way their skin tones blended at the edges, the way the child's black hair mingled with Jenny's braids. They looked like they belonged together, and that realization was making him murderous. The compound materialized out of the darkness like a fortress. High walls topped with cameras, iron gates requiring 3 security checks, guards with assault rifles who didn't ask questions. Jenny's stomach twisted as the SUV rolled to a stop. Joon killed the engine and sat there in the silence, breathing hard through his nose like a bull preparing to charge. "Inside," he said. "Now." He didn't drag her this time, didn't touch her at all. Just walked ahead with Hana cradled against his shoulder, the child reaching back toward Jenny with desperate hands, whimpering, but not crying. Jenny followed because what choice did she have? Every instinct screamed to run, but her legs carried her forward through marble hallways that echoed with their footsteps, through rooms that dripped with wealth and emptiness. Joon deposited Hana with a stone-faced woman who appeared from nowhere, then turned on Jenny with predatory focus. His hand wrapped around her elbow, not bruising, but inescapable, and he hauled her into an office that looked like a war room. Monitors covered one wall, maps marked with territories, a desk the size of a small car. He released her so abruptly she stumbled. Then he moved to the door, locked it with a finality that made her heart stutter, and turned to face her with the full weight of his attention. "Who sent you?" His voice was deceptively soft, the kind of soft that preceded violence. "Was it the Yakuza, the Triads, or are you working for someone I haven't had the pleasure of destroying yet?" Jenny opened her mouth, closed it. Her mind was spinning, trying to piece together what was happening. Why this man thought she was anything more than a waitress trying to survive. "I don't know what you're talking about. I serve food. I go home. That's my entire life." Liar. He moved so fast she didn't see it coming. Suddenly he was in her space, towering over her, one hand braced against the wall beside her head, his body a cage. She could smell him now, whiskey and winter and something sharp like ozone before a storm. His eyes searched her face like he was trying to read a language he'd forgotten. "My daughter hasn't spoken in 3 years, he said, each word precise as a scalpel. 3 years of silence, therapists, specialists, medication, nothing worked. And then you walk up to our table smelling like vanilla and cheap hope, and suddenly she's calling you mama. You expect me to believe that's coincidence? I expect you to believe it's the truth." Jenny's voice shook but held. "I'm nobody. A failed English teacher with an expiring visa. That's all I am." One of the monitors on his desk flickered to life. Hana in another room, sobbing into the arms of the caretaker who looked lost and helpless. The sound crackling through the speakers was heartbreaking, raw, the kind of crying that came from a place too deep for words. Something inside Jenny snapped. She shoved against Joon's chest, and he was so surprised he actually stepped back. She pushed past him, trembling with adrenaline and fury, and something that felt dangerously close to grief. When she spun to face him, she saw her own reflection in his eyes. A woman with nothing left to lose. "You can kill me, Mr. Lee." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "You can make me disappear and no one would notice. But look at her." She pointed at the monitor where Hana wept. "I am the only one who can stop her crying. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I am. So you have a choice. You can hurt me and break her heart, or you can put your ego aside and figure out what's actually happening here. Do you want to be the monster your daughter fears, or do you want to be her father?" The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Joon stared at her, and for the first time since that restaurant, she saw past the armor. Saw the man beneath the monster. Saw someone just as terrified and confused as she was. His jaw unclenched slowly. When he spoke, his voice had lost its edge, replaced by something raw, more dangerous. "What's your name?" "Jenny Hayes." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Respect. Suspicion. And underneath it all, a spark of something neither of them was ready to name. "We're going to find out exactly who you are, Jenny Hayes." He moved to his desk, pressed a button. "And why my daughter knows you." The needle slid into Jenny's arm at 4 in the morning. She didn't fight it, didn't protest when the private doctor with expensive shoes and careful hands swabbed the inside of her cheek, drew her blood, and disappeared into the medical wing of Lee Joon's compound like a ghost. She sat in the guest room they'd locked her in, a gilded cage with silk sheets and bars made of questions she couldn't answer. Lee Joon stood by the window, backlit by Seoul's sprawling neon glow. He hadn't spoken in hours, just stood there, statue still, watching the night bleed into dawn. Jenny could feel the weight of his thoughts pressing against the walls. He thought his wife had cheated. She could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched whenever he looked at Hana's photograph on the mantel. He thought he'd been raising another man's child, thought the features that didn't quite match his own were evidence of betrayal. He'd carried that shame like a brand for 3 years, burning him from the inside out, and he thought Jenny was the key to proving it. What he didn't know was that Jenny had her own ghosts. 3 years ago, she'd walked into a fertility clinic in Itaewon with empty pockets and desperate hope. The advertisement had promised $15 million for a simple gestational surrogacy. Carry someone else's embryo, give life, get paid, no questions asked. She'd signed papers she barely understood, let them put her under, and woken up in a haze of sedatives and agony as they told her the baby hadn't survived. Stillborn. A girl she'd never even gotten to hold. They'd paid her anyway. Guilt money, blood money, and Jenny had taken it because what else could she do? Grieve a child that was never supposed to be hers? Except now, sitting in this mansion prison, watching Lee Joon unravel in slow motion, she felt that phantom ache in her womb roar back to life. That knowing. That pull she'd felt the moment Hana's eyes met hers. The door opened. The doctor returned, his face carefully neutral, holding a manila folder like it contained nuclear codes. Lee Joon turned from the window so fast Jenny flinched. "Well?" His voice was a blade. The doctor set the folder on the desk between them, opened it slowly. Jenny saw numbers and percentages and scientific language that might as well have been hieroglyphics. But she saw the bold text at the bottom. The conclusion that made her world tilt sideways. Miss Hayes is a genetic match to the child, maternal, 99.97% certainty. The doctor paused, his eyes flicking to Lee Joon with something that looked like pity. "And you, Mr. Lee, are the biological father, paternal match, 99.99% certainty." The folder slipped from Lee Joon's fingers. Pages scattered across the mahogany like snow. Jenny couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was spinning, tilting, collapsing inward. The doctor was still talking, explaining something about eggs and surrogacy and medical fraud, but his voice was underwater, distant, meaningless. Lee Joon laughed. It wasn't a sound of joy. It was broken glass and relief, and something so raw it hurt to hear. He laughed until his shoulders shook, until he had to brace himself against the desk, until the sound morphed into something dangerously close to a sob. "She's mine," he whispered, staring at Hana's photo. "She's actually mine." Then his eyes cut to Jenny, and the intensity in them made her stomach drop. He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, like he was approaching something sacred. When he crouched in front of her chair, bringing himself to her level, she could see the tears he refused to let fall. "My wife was infertile," he said, his voice wrecked. "She couldn't carry, couldn't conceive. She was too proud to admit it, too terrified I'd leave her." His hand reached out, hesitated, then gently touched Jenny's knee. The contact sent electricity through her entire body. "She must have used your egg, made it look like a simple surrogacy, lied to everyone, including you." Jenny's breath hitched. "They told me the baby died. They lied." His thumb traced a small circle on her knee, an unconscious gesture that felt unbearably intimate. "They stole her from you, and they let me think." His jaw worked. "They let me believe I'd been betrayed, that she'd given me another man's child to raise." The shame in his eyes was gutting. "You weren't betrayed," Jenny whispered. "You were used." "We both were." Lee Joon stood abruptly, pulling her up with him. His hands framed her face and she should have been terrified, but all she felt was the magnetic pull of his desperation. You weren't just the oven, Jenny. You are the fire. His forehead dropped against hers, breath mingling in the space between them. She is yours, and she is mine. The words hung in the air like a vow, like a threat, like a promise neither of them knew how to keep. Dr. Kim lived in a luxury apartment in Cheongdam-dong that smelled like old money and older secrets. Jenny insisted on coming. Joon had tried to leave her at the compound with Hana, tried to shield her from what he needed to do, but she'd looked at him with those dark eyes that saw too much and said, "She was stolen from me. I need to see the man who sold my grief." So here they were, standing in Kim's private study at 5 in the morning. The doctor sat in his leather chair, like a king who'd just realized his throne was burning. He was in his 60s, silver-haired with hands that trembled as he poured himself scotch he wouldn't get to finish. Jenny noticed the medical degrees on the wall, the photos of his grandchildren, the comfortable life built on lies and blood money. Joon didn't sit, didn't pace, just stood by the door like an executioner waiting for the appointed hour, his presence filling the room with barely controlled rage. Jenny could feel the violence coiled inside him, could sense how badly he wanted to tear this man apart with his bare hands. But he was holding back. For her, because she'd asked to hear the truth first. "You told me my baby died," Jenny said, her voice steady despite the fury singing through her veins. "You looked me in the eye while I was bleeding and broken, and you told me she was gone." Dr. Kim's scotch glass rattled against the desk. "I was paid handsomely. I didn't ask questions. That was the arrangement." "Who paid you?" Joon's voice was silk over steel. The doctor's eyes darted between them, calculating his survival odds. They weren't good. "Park Min-ho, your underboss. He came to me 4 years ago with a proposition. Your wife needed a surrogate. Confidential, off the books. He handled everything, the contracts, the payments, the delivery." Jenny felt her stomach turn. "And after, when you told me she died?" "Min-ho said it was cleaner that way. No loose ends. No mother showing up later with demands or attachments." Dr. Kim's hands shook harder. He said the Lee family needed an heir that looked legitimate, pure. But when the baby came out, he swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to Jenny's brown skin. When she didn't look Korean enough, he panicked. The room went very still. Even the city sounds outside seemed to fade into nothing. What did he do? Joon's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut like a razor. He tried to fix it. Couldn't make the baby disappear without raising questions. Your wife was already too attached, but he could eliminate the problem later once he had control. So he waited. Planned. Dr. Kim was sweating now, his expensive shirt staining under the arms. And 6 months after the birth, there was an accident. Jenny's breath stopped in her chest. She watched Joon's face drain of color, watched the realization hit him like a bullet. "The car bomb that killed my wife," he said, his words gravel. "That wasn't an accident. Min-ho wanted them both gone. Your wife knew too much about the surrogacy. The child was evidence of deception. He needed a clean slate. So when you remarried someone he approved of, someone pure-blooded, the succession would be clear. He'd control it. Control you." Dr. Kim was talking faster now, desperate. "The fact that the child survived was a mistake. The bodyguard got her out. He's been trying to correct that mistake ever since." Jenny felt something crack open inside her chest. Not just grief, not just rage. Something colder, more calculating. She understood now why Hana had never spoken. The child had witnessed her mother die, had been trapped in a burning car, had been saved by chance, not love. And all of it, every single piece of trauma, had been orchestrated by a man who saw her as expendable because her blood wasn't pure enough. "Where is he now?" Jenny heard herself ask, her voice strange and distant. "The Dragon's Head building, his office. He thinks he's untouchable." Dr. Kim's eyes were pleading now. "I told you everything. Please, I have a family." Lee Joon moved. One moment he was by the door. The next he was leaning over Kim's desk, his face inches from the doctor's. You stole her child. You sold my wife's desperation. You enabled a man who murdered my family. His voice dropped to something inhuman. Your family will mourn you, but they'll live. That's more mercy than you deserve. What happened next, Jenny didn't see. Lee Joon's hand moved to the small of his back, and she turned away, focusing on the family photos on the wall, the evidence of a life built on other people's suffering. She heard a sound, brief, final. Then silence. When Lee Joon's hand touched her shoulder, she turned back. The room looked the same. Dr. Kim looked asleep in his chair, head tilted back, eyes closed. Almost peaceful. Almost. We should go, Lee Joon said quietly, his hand sliding down her arm to grip her wrist gently. Not a captor's hold, a partner's. Minho doesn't know we know yet. That's our advantage. Jenny nodded, letting him lead her toward the door. But before they left, she looked back one more time at the man who'd stolen her daughter and sold her grief for money. Good, she whispered. In the car, the silence between them was different, heavier, more intimate. They weren't just bound by biology anymore. They were bound by shared rage, by the knowledge that someone had tried to erase their daughter from existence, and by the understanding that they would destroy him together. Lee Joon's hand found hers in the darkness, fingers lacing through hers with startling gentleness. He wanted her dead because she looked like you, he said, his voice raw. Because she was beautiful and mixed and evidence of something he couldn't control. Jenny squeezed his hand back, feeling the calluses, the strength, the tremor of barely leashed fury. Then we make sure he fails spectacularly. His smile in the rearview mirror was terrifying and beautiful all at once. I knew there was fire in you. They returned to the compound as dawn bled gold across Seoul's skyline. Jenny expected Lee Joon to retreat to his war room, to plan Minho's destruction with cold precision. Instead, he led her to a private garden, a glass-enclosed sanctuary filled with orchids and silence. Hana was still sleeping. The house was holding its breath. Lee Joon poured whiskey into crystal glasses, handed her one without asking. Jenny took it because her hands needed something to hold. Minho is powerful, Lee Joon said, staring out at frost-covered bamboo. He controls half my operations, has loyalty I've spent years cultivating. If he discovers you're Hana's biological mother, he won't hesitate. You become the final loose end. Jenny's throat tightened. So what are you saying? I disappear? Change my name? Spend my life looking over my shoulder? No. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her stomach flip. You become untouchable, legitimized, protected by law and reputation so thoroughly that killing you would require declaring war on me directly. He paused, letting the words settle. You marry me. The glass nearly slipped from her fingers. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. He moved closer, not crowding her, but close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. Think about it logically. You're already living here. Hana's already bonded to you. A marriage contract makes you family, untraceable, above suspicion. Minho can't touch you without exposing himself. That's insane. But even as she said it, Jenny's mind was racing through the implications. He was right. Marriage would legitimize everything. Is it? Lee Joon's voice dropped lower, more intimate. Or is it the only move that makes sense? We're already bound by her. This just makes it official. Jenny set her glass down carefully, needing distance. And what do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Lee? His smile was slow, dangerous. I get you. The words hung between them like smoke. I'm not sleeping in your bed, Jenny said quickly, drawing a line before he could cross it. This is for Hana. Protection, strategy, nothing more. Lee Joon studied her for a long moment, something flickering in his dark eyes that looked almost like amusement. Agreed. Separate rooms, separate lives, a marriage on paper only. He extended his hand like they were sealing a business deal. "Do we have an accord, Miss Hayes?" Jenny looked at his hand. Strong, scarred, capable of terrible things. And somehow, impossibly capable of gentleness when he held his daughter. She thought about Hana's small fingers clutching her uniform. Thought about the way the child had finally stopped crying when Jenny held her. Thought about Minho out there right now, planning another accident. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, sending electricity up her arm that she absolutely refused to acknowledge. "We have an accord, Mr. Lee." "Joon," he corrected, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt far too intimate for a business transaction. "If you're going to be my wife, even in name only, you should probably use my name." She pulled her hand back before she did something stupid. "Fine, Joon. When do we do this?" "Tomorrow. I'll have my lawyers draft the contract. We'll keep it quiet until after the Black Dragon Gala next month. Public announcement. Minho will be in attendance. He'll have no choice but to smile and congratulate us while his entire plan crumbles." Lee Joon's expression turned predatory. "And then we'll watch him very carefully to see what desperate move he makes next." Jenny nodded, her mind already spinning through scenarios, through dangers, through the 1,000 ways this could go catastrophically wrong. But beneath the fear, beneath the logic, something else was stirring. Something that heated her skin when Lee Joon looked at her like that. Something that whispered dangerous possibilities in the space between them. "One more thing," Lee Joon said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He produced a small velvet box that looked vintage, expensive, heavy with history. "You'll need this." He opened it to reveal a ring that stole her breath. Not a diamond. A black pearl surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the morning light and threw it back in prismatic defiance. It was stunning. It was terrifying. It was exactly the kind of thing a man like Lee Joon would choose, beautiful and deadly all at once. "It was my grandmother's," he said quietly. "She was Korean, married a black American soldier against her family's wishes. They said it wouldn't last. They were married 52 years. He lifted the ring from its cushion. "Give me your hand." Jenny hesitated. Once that ring was on her finger, everything changed. She wouldn't just be Jenny Hayes anymore. She'd be Mrs. Lee, the Black Dragon's wife, a target and a queen all at once. She extended her left hand. Lee Joon's fingers were steady as he slid the ring onto her fourth finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Like fate had been playing this game long before either of them knew the rules. His thumb lingered on her hand for a heartbeat too long, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Separate rooms," he murmured, but his voice carried a promise that had nothing to do with distance. "For now." Jenny pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest, feeling the weight of the ring like a brand. "For now" implies something changes later. His smile was pure sin. "Hope is a dangerous thing, Jenny. But I've always been an optimist." 4 weeks passed like a fever dream. Jenny watched the compound transform from mausoleum to home, one small miracle at a time. Hana spoke her second word on a Wednesday morning while Jenny braided her hair. "Pretty." Then her third word that same afternoon, unprompted, unpracticed. "Stay." By the end of the first week, the child was stringing together simple sentences, her voice hesitant but growing stronger, like a bird learning it had wings. Lee Joon watched them from doorways, from the top of stairs, from across rooms where he pretended to work but was really just observing. The way Jenny moved through his house like she'd always belonged there. The way she sang while making breakfast. The way she'd curl up with Hana in the library and read stories in voices that made his daughter laugh. Real laughter. The kind that echoed. The house stopped feeling like a tomb. It started feeling dangerous. Tonight was the Black Dragon Gala. Their public debut as husband and wife. The marriage certificate had been signed in a lawyer's office with cold efficiency, witnessed by people who asked no questions. But tonight, Seoul's underworld would see them together, would watch Lee Joon claim her, would force Minho to smile while his empire cracked beneath his feet. Jenny stood in her room, staring at the dress Lee Joon had sent. black silk that looked like it cost more than her entire previous life. She'd already showered, her skin still warm and damp, her hair loose around her shoulders in natural curls she usually kept contained. The dress hung on the door like a challenge. She reached for the zipper. It caught halfway up her spine, refusing to cooperate. She twisted, trying to reach it, cursing under her breath as her shoulder protested. A knock at the door made her freeze. "It's me," Lee Joon's voice muffled through wood. "May I come in?" She should have said no, should have told him to wait. But something reckless in her, something that had been building for 4 weeks of stolen glances and accidental touches, made her say yes. He entered with that predatory grace that made the room feel smaller. He'd already dressed for the gala, black suit that fit him like a weapon, hair swept back, tattoos hidden except for the ones that crept up his neck like dark vines. He looked devastating. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. "I heard you struggling," he said, his voice rougher than usual. His eyes traveled down her bare back, lingering on the exposed zipper. "Let me." Jenny's breath stuttered. "I can do it. I know you can." He moved closer, each step measured. "But you don't have to." She turned, presenting her back to him, feeling exposed in ways that had nothing to do with the dress. His fingers brushed her skin as he grasped the zipper, and she felt the contact like lightning. Slowly, agonizingly, he drew it upward. The rasp of metal teeth was obscenely loud in the quiet room. His fingers stilled at her shoulder blade. "What's this?" She knew what he'd found. The scar. 4 inches long, raised and pale against her brown skin. A souvenir from the clinic. From the emergency surgery when everything had gone wrong. When they'd carved her open to take Hannah and left her with this permanent reminder. "A scar," she said, trying to keep her voice light. Failing. "I can see that." His thumb traced it with devastating gentleness. The touch was more intimate than anything they'd shared. "Who hurt you?" Her eyes burned. "Life." The word hung between them, heavy with all the things she couldn't say. Lee Joon finished with the zipper, but didn't step away. Instead, his hands settled on her shoulders, turning her gently to face him. His eyes searched hers, seeing too much. Then, without breaking eye contact, he shrugged off his jacket, began rolling up his left sleeve. "What are you doing?" Jenny whispered. He exposed his forearm. The burn scar was massive, covering from wrist to elbow. The skin was mottled, puckered, the kind of injury that spoke of agony and survival in equal measure. "The explosion that killed my wife," he said quietly. "I went back in for Hannah. The car was engulfed. This was the price." His fingers found hers, guiding her hand to the ruined skin. "Life tried to take everything from me that night. It failed." Jenny's fingers trembled against his scar, feeling the texture, the story written in damaged tissue. She looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "We're both survivors," he murmured, his free hand coming up to cup her face with heartbreaking tenderness. Both scarred, both still standing. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she leaned into the touch without meaning to. "So, let us hurt life back together." The words were a promise, a threat, a prayer. Jenny didn't know who moved first. Didn't know if she rose on her toes or if he lowered his head, but suddenly his forehead was pressed against hers, his breath mingling with hers, the space between them crackling with 4 weeks of denial and want and fear and need. "This isn't part of the agreement," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. "No," he agreed, his hand sliding from her face to the back of her neck, fingers threading through her curls. "This is something else entirely. Joon, say it again." His voice was raw. "Say my name like that. Joon." And this time it wasn't a warning. It was surrender. He kissed her like a man starving, like a man who'd been holding back for so long he'd forgotten what restraint felt like. His mouth moved against hers with desperate precision, tasting, claiming, demanding everything she'd been afraid to give. Jenny's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath her palms, and she kissed him back with equal ferocity. 4 weeks of tension combusting in a single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lee Joon's eyes were black with want. "We have a gala to attend." "Yes," Jenny managed, though her entire body was screaming to stay. "And after," he said, tucking a curl behind her ear with shaking fingers, "we'll talk about revising our agreement." She smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Maybe I like our agreement just fine." His answering grin promised war. "Then I'll just have to change your mind." The Dragon's Head Ballroom was a cathedral of excess. Crystal chandeliers dripped light like tears. The champagne was French, the liquor premium, and the guest list read like a directory of Seoul's most beautiful monsters. Prosecutors rubbed shoulders with smugglers. Judges laughed with loan sharks. Everyone wore designer masks of civility while plotting their neighbor's destruction. Jenny descended the grand staircase on Lee Joon's arm, her black dress flowing like ink against white marble. She'd pinned her curls up, exposing the elegant line of her neck, the diamond earrings Lee Joon had fastened there himself. She looked like a queen. She felt like prey. Every eye in the room turned. Conversations stuttered and died. The Black Dragon never brought dates to these events, never showed vulnerability, never shared. But here he was, his hand possessive on the small of her back, introducing her as his wife with a pride that was almost territorial. Jenny felt the weight of 100 stares, calculating her worth, measuring her threat level, wondering how a nobody foreigner had ended up wearing Lee Joon's grandmother's pearl ring. Park Min-ho stood near the bar, immaculate in charcoal silk, his smile sharp as a knife. He was handsome in the way poisonous things often were. Perfect features, cold eyes. When Lee Joon led Jenny toward him, that smile widened. "Congratulations on your marriage," Min-ho said smoothly, extending his hand to Jenny. "How unexpected, how sudden." Jenny shook his hand, feeling the barely concealed violence in his grip. "When you know, you know." Indeed. His eyes traveled over her face with unnerving focus. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" "I don't think so," Jenny said, but her heart was hammering. Could he know? Had he been watching her all along? Lee Joon's hand tightened on her waist. "Darling, I see the Yakuza delegation. We should pay our respects." He guided her away, but Jenny could feel Min-ho's eyes following them like a predator tracking movement. The evening stretched on, a performance that left her exhausted. She smiled, made small talk, played the part while Lee Joon navigated political waters with ruthless charm. Then came the announcement for the charity auction. Lee Joon squeezed her hand. "I need to handle something. Stay visible. Stay with people. Don't go anywhere alone." "I'll be fine," she assured him, though unease crawled up her spine. He kissed her forehead, lingering longer than necessary. 10 minutes. She watched him disappear into a private corridor with several syndicate heads. Jenny accepted champagne from a passing waiter and moved toward the terrace for air. That's when Min-ho materialized beside her. "Enjoying the view, Mrs. Lee?" His voice was silk over razors. Jenny's grip tightened on her glass. "It's beautiful. You know what's interesting?" Min-ho leaned against the railing. Too close. "I was reviewing some old files today. Fertility clinic records, surrogacy contracts, and I found a photograph attached to one particular file." He turned to look at her, and his smile was venomous. "You look exactly like the photo. Same eyes, same bone structure, almost like fate wanted me to find you." Jenny's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" He moved closer, backing her against the stone balustrade. "You were supposed to be a ghost, a nobody, someone who'd take the money and disappear. But here you are, wearing his ring, playing mother to a child that should have died." His voice dropped to a whisper that froze her soul. "Pity you'll burn just as easily as the first wife." Jenny opened her mouth to scream, but the world exploded. The lights cut out. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in red. Someone shouted about a fire in the kitchen. Panic rippled through the crowd. In the chaos, Min-ho grabbed her arm with bruising force, dragging her backward into shadows. She fought, clawed at his hands. But then something hard connected with her temple, and the world tilted. She heard someone crying. Hana. The child was here. They'd brought Hana, and now she was screaming somewhere in the darkness. Jenny tried to call out, but her vision was tunneling. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Min-ho's cold smile and Hana's terrified face as someone carried her away. Lee Joon knew something was wrong the moment the lights died. His instincts screamed danger. He abandoned the meeting mid-sentence and ran for the ballroom, his hand already reaching for the gun beneath his jacket. The crowd was evacuating, security herding guests toward exits. But Jenny wasn't among them. His eyes scanned the room with increasing desperation. No black dress, no familiar silhouette, nothing. Then he saw it on the marble floor near the terrace entrance. A single diamond earring, the backing torn away like it had been ripped from flesh. Blood smeared on stone, and beside it, small and devastating, Hana's plush bunny. The rage that consumed him was biblical. He picked up the earring with shaking hands, feeling the sticky warmth of Jenny's blood, and something inside him that had been carefully controlled shattered completely. "Find them!" he roared at his security detail, his voice raw with fury and fear. "Find them now, or I burn this city to the ground." But he already knew who had taken them, already knew where this ended. Min-ho had finally made his move, and Lee Joon was going to make him regret being born. He pulled out his phone. "Trace her," he said when the line connected. "Trace my wife, and send everyone. Because if Min-ho hurt them, there wouldn't be enough of him left to bury." Jenny woke to rain and terror. Her head throbbed where Min-ho had struck her, blood matting her hair. She was on a rooftop, the Dragon's Head building, 50 stories above Seoul's glittering sprawl. The storm overhead was apocalyptic, lightning fracturing the sky, thunder shaking the building's bones. Hana was screaming. That sound cut through the fog in Jenny's brain like a scalpel. She forced her eyes open, forced herself to move despite the vertigo. Min-ho stood at the edge of the roof, one hand gripping Hana by her small arm, dangling her over the void. The child was hysterical, reaching for anything, anyone, finding only empty air and rain. "No!" Jenny choked out, trying to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The world spun. The rooftop access door exploded open. Lee Joon emerged like vengeance incarnate, gun drawn, his face a mask of pure murder. Rain plastered his hair to his skull, his suit soaked black, his eyes wild with the kind of fear that transformed men into monsters. "Let her go," Lee Joon commanded, his voice carrying over the storm. Min-ho laughed, the sound unhinged. "That's exactly what I'm doing, letting go of the mistake you made, the pollution you allowed into our bloodline." He shook Hana like a rag doll. "You married a black woman, claimed her mongrel child as your heir. You've destroyed everything pure about the Black Dragon." "She's my daughter," Lee Joon roared, taking a step forward. "Mine and hers, my blood, my family." "Exactly." Min-ho's smile was demonic. "And that's why she has to die. I'll cleanse this mistake. You'll remarry someone appropriate, have real heirs. The syndicate will be pure again." Lee Joon's gun arm shook. He couldn't shoot, not with Hana in Min-ho's grip. One wrong move and the child would fall. "What do you want? Your life or hers? Choose." Jenny watched Lee Joon's face crumble, watched the calculation, the impossible mathematics of love and loss. She knew what he'd choose, saw it in the way he slowly lowered his gun. "Fine," Lee Joon said, his voice breaking. "Take it, just don't hurt her, please." Min-ho's grin widened. How noble. Then he opened his hand. Hana dropped. Everything happened in fragments. Lee Joon's scream, raw and animal, Min-ho's laughter, the way time seemed to slow as the little girl in the pale blue dress plummeted toward the ledge. But Jenny was already moving. She didn't think, just acted on pure maternal instinct. She launched herself across the rain-slicked roof, her vision tunneling to a single point, Hana's small body arcing through space. Jenny hit the ledge at a full sprint and dove. Her hand closed around Hana's wrist just as the child cleared the edge. The momentum carried them both over, and for one infinite moment they were falling together. Then Jenny's other hand caught the ledge. Her fingers screamed, her shoulder socket nearly dislocating from the sudden stop. But she held on. Held on to concrete with one hand and Hana with the other, suspended over 50 stories of nothing. Yama, Hana sobbed, clinging to Jenny's arm with tiny, desperate hands. I've got you, Jenny gasped, though her grip was failing. I've got you, baby. Above them, Joon moved. She heard him roar, heard the sound of impact, of violence unleashed, but she couldn't look, could only focus on holding Hana. Then Joon's face appeared over the edge, his eyes wild and desperate. Give me your hand. I can't let go, Jenny said through gritted teeth. If I reach for you, she falls. Trust me, his voice cracked. Please, Jenny, trust me. She looked into his eyes and saw everything they could have been, everything they still might be. So she made the choice. She let go of the ledge. For one terrifying second, they dropped. Then Joon's hands locked around her wrist like iron, his other arm hooking Hana around the waist. He pulled, muscles straining, face contorted with effort, dragging them both up and over the ledge until they collapsed in a tangle of limbs on the rooftop. Jenny held Hana against her chest, feeling the child's heart hammer against her own, both of them sobbing. Joon wrapped around them both, his body a shield, his arms refusing to let go. You caught her, he whispered into Jenny's hair, his voice destroyed. You saved her. Our daughter, Jenny corrected, looking up at him through the rain. I saved our daughter. Something in Joon's face shattered and reformed. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful and terrified, tasting rain and blood. Hana sandwiched between them, safe and whole. The three of them, a knot of survival in the storm. Somewhere behind them, Minho lay motionless, his neck at an unnatural angle, the threat eliminated. But none of that mattered as much as this moment. The three of them breathing together, alive together, family in every way that counted. Let's go home, Joon said, helping them both to their feet. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Jenny knew exactly where home was. Not a place, not a house, but here, in the space between his heartbeat and hers, with their daughter's hand clasped tight between them. 6 months later, Jenny stood in the same garden where Joon had proposed their marriage of convenience, but everything was different now. The orchids were blooming. Hana was running through the bamboo, laughing, speaking in full sentences, calling them both without hesitation. Iyama, Appa, Mama, Daddy. Joon came up behind Jenny, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? How far we've come, she said, leaning back into him. How I almost ran that first night. I would have found you, he murmured against her neck. Always. She turned in his arms to face him. I'm glad I stayed. So am I. Hana ran up to them, grabbing both their hands. Come play, she demanded, tugging them toward the garden. And they went, because that's what family did. They showed up. They stayed. They chose each other every single day. That night, after Hana was asleep, Joon and Jenny lay tangled together in bed. No longer separate rooms. No longer a marriage on paper only. Just two survivors who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something beautiful from the ruins. I love you, Joon said into the darkness. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. Jenny's breath caught. She turned to face him, her hand coming up to cup his scarred face. I love you too. And she meant it, with every broken piece of her heart that he'd helped put back together. Outside, Seoul glittered like a promise. Inside, the most dangerous man in the city held his wife and knew he'd finally found something worth more than all his empire, worth more than power or fear or control. He'd found home, and he would burn the world before he let anyone take it from him again. And that's how a single word from a child's mouth rewrote destiny. How a waitress became a queen. How a monster learned to love. And how a family was forged in fire and blood and impossible choices. If this story grabbed you by the throat and refused to let go, if you felt every heartbeat, every fear, every moment of devastating hope, then smash that like button. Hit subscribe because we're just getting started. And drop a comment telling me which moment destroyed you most. Until next time, remember, the most dangerous love stories are the ones that make you believe in second chances.